First, I invite Gregory Rehmke, who's a program director at Economic Thinking. He worked with Reason Foundation, Institute for Humane Studies, and FEE. And he also co-authored a book, I really like the title, Complete Idiot's Guide to Global Economics. But today we will be talking about how to live a longer and healthier life. And I think both panelists do excel at that, as we can see. Nutrition and Metabolic Health by Dr. Rehmke, and then we move to... We will meet on the stage later.
Okay. So, thank you for coming to the presentation. It's a pleasure to be here. My overall theme is we're not going to have a healthy economy without healthy people. And it's hard to have free people who are suffering in pain. And who's to blame for all this? Well, government, of course. But how did that happen? How did that happen? So I've got a bunch of things on here. I remembered Star Trek, Live Long and Prosper. And so that's economic flourishing, freedom, and living a long time. I've forgotten how long the Vulcans lived, maybe 200 years, I don't remember. I also put a Make America Healthy Again hat on there. You notice it's a blue hat, not a red hat, although you can get them in red. But this is R.F. Kennedy Jr., who's a Democrat, who was, I don't know how it works, but now he's a key figure in the administration, and I'm not a fan of all his stuff. I don't understand all of what he does, but he's key in a number of ways, and I hope I can explain how that'll play out. What I do mostly is workshops for high school and homeschool speech and debate students across the country. I've been at 4 Texas universities through the fall to speak at UIL programs, University Interscholastic League, 1,500 or so high schools with debate programs, speaking on their debate topic, which is agroecology versus industrial agriculture, sort of weird, and also on intellectual property rights. So what I'm going to try and do is go through some of these ideas. Last year, the STOA Debate League had a topic on federal energy policy, so that was exciting to work through, and you could learn about how the government has messed up our energy policy by subsidizing intermittent, unreliable energy that raised our prices a lot. This year, their topic is healthcare reform, so we've got books like from the Cato Institute, Recovery, which I think is out on the Cato table, as well as Priceless by John Goodman, the Independent Institute, and the Goodman Institute, that are looking at how to reduce regulations and sort of promote medical savings accounts and so forth and deregulate. And then Blind Spots, the book that just came out that is terrific, but also 2 other books, Georgia Eads, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind, and Why We Get Sick by Ben Bickman. There are many, many fascinating books about metabolic health, and we have an epidemic of chronic disease in this country, and young people are affected by it, old people, and we have a medical system that's the best in the world at a whole bunch of things, but not so good at other things. And so trying to track this down is part of the challenge. So this is a flyer for the, I do workshops for homeschool clubs, and then we've done some online as well. Now, what has the government done to our energy grid? Made it less reliable, that is for our cars, our homes, our factories, raised the price, pushed us in the direction they want, influenced by environmentalists, wind and solar industry, and so forth. What has it done to our bodies? Similarly, has promoted intermittent energy that's made our body more fragile, much like the electrical grid. So there's a sort of energy connection. We've had earlier talks about power. Well, my talk is about power, and the power that powers our body. So we eat food, we get energy from that, and that energy, how we metabolize that energy, is key to our health and our moving ourselves around. Okay, so Nutrition Against Disease was my talk last year at Liberty International, and fun to cover various different topics on that. I gave an economics talk, this APPE conference, they wanted, the subject had to be money. Well, I'm interested in nutrition, so I wrote a whole paper on nutritious money. That is commodity money based on mackerel, cattle, and other sorts of things. It was weird, but it was fun to do. And I sort of argued, what if the Scottish Enlightenment, what if, the ancient Greeks, what if they accomplished so much because they had more energy? What if eating fish gave them more brain energy to do more than societies based on grain? So we can rewrite the ancient Persian wars and look at what they ate. Okay, then debate camps this year, I'm talking about metabolic health. Get my water set up here. And so much of this is an exploration. I mean, my story of how I got in this very briefly is in 2020, my father passed away in April. He lived to about 90, but he'd suffered from type 2 diabetes for 15 years and got worse and worse. And here I am, a researcher. I've had healthcare topics a lot, and I didn't bother to look into type 2 diabetes to understand what was going on. But he was told to eat low fat. He had oatmeal every morning and blueberries. And then I watched Nina Teicholz give a talk at the Cato Institute about metabolic health and the food pyramid. And I had her book. One morning I looked in the mirror and I seemed pretty fit, and then I turned sideways. I had this big gut, So I lost 20 pounds in the next month, another 20 pounds over the next 6 months, so 40 pounds down, significant percentage of my body weight, not through dieting, not through willpower. I don't have much willpower. But through knowledge. I stopped eating breakfast. I stopped eating Raisin Bran, which has 17 grams of sugar in it. I looked at the corn from Costco. It's tons of sugar in it if you look at what's in it. So changing what I ate made a big difference, having more eggs, meat, fish. So it was keto or low carb or carnivore or whatever. But for me, it seemed to work. So I don't get hungry. And now I do fasting. Anyway, long story, but agroecology was a topic for Texas, and I added in regenerative agriculture, and I just have discovered the power of regenerative agriculture, and you can blame the government for that, of course, with government subsidies for grains and so forth, but I'm going to talk about sort of the hidden half of nature, the things that we don't think about that are crucial. So, again, for the economic side of this, we got special interests. The wind, solar, geothermal have pushed their preferred energies. EV, electric vehicles, could be great, but when you have subsidies and push them down, you distort the way they develop. You're crossing subsidies. It's a mess. So we've got this tangled mess of political subsidies, top-down green projects, regulatory overreach. And guess what? Same thing inside. For 50 years, the government has promoted a couple ideas about food that you need to eat. Lots of carbohydrates, lots of meals. You need to cut down saturated fat, reduce fat, eat healthy fat instead, which they say is vegetable oils, polyunsaturated fats. So public officials advise and mandate against mandate grains and other carbohydrates, seed oils, and the problem is that these drive insulin resistance and inflammation. And this research is growing and growing and growing, and now we have, again, the fragile grid, inside and outside. These two books I recommend. Ben Bickman is one of the leading guys. He's not a doctor, he's a researcher on insulin resistance. And Catherine Shanahan, her earlier book, Deep Nutrition, is fascinated as well, and she's sort of focused on seed oils being the problem first. We're getting less and less healthy. She was a doctor in Kauai for a number of years and had a number of patients from the Polynesian cultures, and the grandparents were fit, the parents were less fit, the children are sick. And somehow the diet for those people, instead of the nose-to-tail ancestral diet, switching to modern food has made them sick, or at least contributed to it. Just a quick, the relevance of this, I had some slides on Medicare and Medicaid and how they're bankrupting the country. There's people on the left who say we should have health care for all, free health care, just like in Canada and Europe. Well, they did in Oregon. They did an experiment. They gave everybody access to free health care. It was an anomaly that lasted for a couple years. So they were able to do a study. They did a lottery. The people that won the lottery got free health care. Those who didn't, of Medicaid, of low-income people. So then they looked at the data 10 years later. What did they find? Zero benefits from having free government health care. Maybe less anxiety, I guess, because you could go to a doctor. But why is it that we gave them access and they did go to doctors much more, they got more medications, but there was no benefit, measurable benefit in those people with the free health care? Why is that? Well, it's a sign that some of the advice maybe was wrong. For example, people who are overweight who go to their regular doctor or a government doctor are told to eat less and exercise more. People with type 2 diabetes are medicated and eventually get insulin, but there's other ways to deal with those conditions. But this is as though the type 2 diabetes is a big part of this. So I'm just briefly on the big story. I have a study with the Goodman Institute, Did the Government Make Us Fat? And sort of the core article is on obesity, that what the government thinks, what the nutrition departments think, what is taught, is that obesity is an energy balance problem. It's thermodynamics, right? If you're consuming X number of calories and you're not burning those, you're going to gain weight. And that seems really plausible, except it's mixed up in a whole lot of ways. And the alternate theory is the carbohydrate insulin resistance model, that a lot of people just can't manage to process carbohydrates effectively. And when the government with the food pyramid told us to stop eating red meat and meats, reduce fat, reduce saturated fat, and that meant more carbohydrates. So, but for people who can't manage carbohydrates, that led to weight gain. So the argument is so what you really want to do is measure people's blood glucose levels so that they can be stable with blood glucose, right? Because both of these books I showed earlier, they're deep into nutritional biochemistry. And, not everybody wants to study biochemistry. Well, if you want to live longer, I suggest you spend some time at least understanding your own internal biochemistry, because we're all different. Our bodies work different. Roger Williams at University of Texas did research on this decades ago. It's amazing. So we're fueled by carbohydrates, protein, or fat, right? The macronutrients we eat. And you don't have to have carbohydrates. Your body needs glucose, but you can get, your body can make its own carbohydrates. But the key is how stable is your blood glucose level. And that's part of the story. So anyway, that's that. Oops. I'm stuck. Which gives you more time to look at that slide and read the tiny print on it, right? It's a fascinating story. This is a huge debate still going on about what's causing these things and how to resolve them. But now there's a whole network of doctors that are providing metabolic health coaching, and because of the lockdown, they can do it online. So a lot of these doctors are providing their services all over the country. So this at the bottom end of that flyer, this is if you want to find information on this that I think is science-based, nutritioncoalition.us is one of the best. Unsettled Science is the Substack page of Nina Teicholz. Nina Teicholz is being considered now for the head of the Federal Dietary Guidelines Commission, the one that she's been criticizing for a decade or more. And then other people. So a lot of this is on podcasts and videos you can watch from Low Carb Down Under, Diet Doctor, Metabolic Mind. And Terence Keeley, this is one of the most compelling talks I've ever seen. This is done for CrossFit. He's a British science researcher. He was associated with the Cato Institute. He's the one who brought Nina Teicholz in to speak for them. And, part of this is modeling, right? There's climate models, financial models, pandemic models, and these models were wrong in a lot of ways that had a huge impact on the misguided government policies. And so for modeling reality, what reality are we looking for? And it turns out the nutrition models are actually the worst. And so there's an interesting discussion of that. There's a cool book called Escape from Model Land that's, sort of gives you a sense of how these were led by models. And in economics, they keep doing models, and the models are seen as evidence, but the models are messed up in many ways. And Keeley is the author of a book called Breakfast is a Dangerous Meal. He was a healthy, fit guy, scientist, and all of a sudden he wakes up one day, his wife forced him to go to the doctor, and he had type 2 diabetes. And he said, well, how did that happen? He's not overweight, he seems fine. Well, he did some research and he found that breakfast is the most dangerous meal. Maybe not for everybody, but for a lot of people. So Nina Teicholz talks about this pyramid of evidence, rigorous systematic reviews, randomized control trials, and down to the bottom. But the federal dietary guidelines are now based on an evidence so bad it's not even listed. It's a model. They built a model that shows that high carbs are good for you. And the model is based on faulty data, and they use that model to justify their policies. Okay, shifting gears a bit. My title was Digging It Deep and Shining a Light, sort of understanding what's inside. 2 books I recommend, Growing a Revolution and What Your Food Ate. We talk about the importance of eating nutrient-dense food, food that's good for our blood glucose. We not only need the right sort of fats for our energy, we need a whole bunch of micronutrients. And these micronutrients, magnesium, calcium, other sorts of things, and those come from the food we eat. And it matters what our food ate, right? So is chicken healthy? Well, it depends what the chicken was fed. Is an egg healthy? What did the chicken eat? How much sun did it get? So you're trying to look at nutrient density, and this whole revolution in regenerative agriculture is tapping into the hidden half of nature, which is the rhizome. Like on our health, this is the microbiome. So here's the big problem. The last century, the average mineral content in calcium, magnesium, iron in cabbage, lettuce, tomatoes has gone down about 90%. So maybe eating vegetables was healthier a century ago or decades ago than it is now. What we've done is depleted the soil in various ways, and so we get a huge increase in yield, but the nutrients aren't as dense. So now we have to look at the idea of how do we get those nutrients back into the soil. And similarly around the world with low iodine, vitamin E, calcium, huge problems in the developing world through lack of adequate nutrition. And by the way, these overheads will be available on Liberty International, and I have them on my economic thinking site too. And huge data, where did this come from? Well, this study challenges and diagnose. It's hard to diagnose magnesium, so they don't diagnose it as much, but we have 70% of people are apparently magnesium deficient. And there's 3 kinds of magnesium supplements. One is good, one is bad, one's in the middle. It's complicated. And then inadequate levels of micronutrients critical for diet around the world. This, Rhonda Patrick at UC Berkeley writes on some of these things, and she's a student of Bruce Ames. Those of you who are older may remember Bruce Ames and the Ames test. He was featured in Reason magazine. He's the one who found that all these chemicals in the environment were carcinogens, could cause cancer. And he was beloved by the environmentalists who could then sue everybody. And then he kept doing the testing, and he found there were carcinogens in broccoli and cabbage and all these other things. So it turns out there's a lot of things that can be carcinogenic. The question is how does our body deal with things that are carcinogenic? Lots of books on food, the food industry. John Mackey, I think, is a vegetarian or vegan, but you have to be careful to get the adequate nutrients from plants because they're not as bioavailable and they've got anti-nutrients. But lots of stuff for students to research, and now these books are selling, and these people, this one, Casey Means, she and her brother are the main person that connected RF Kennedy Jr. to Trump. And her brother used to be with the Heritage Foundation, so they're free market people. They can come across as anti-business, but that's just, it's a good thing about this, you can pick your bad guys. If you're anti-business, you can blame big food industry and the pharmaceutical industry. If you're anti-government, you can blame the government. There's enough blame for everybody. And of course, you blame yourself, but that's maybe not healthy right off the bat. So am I going to have my 5-minute card from some part of the room? 10 minutes, okay, good. So, but we have a debate. So here's the keto, I think, is connected with human progress. And here's our global cereal yields. They're going up dramatically. So people are saying, look, we're losing soil density. The soil's terrible. We're all going to, die. But yield goes up and up and up year after year. So there's an article on the counter-agricultural revolution where they're saying we need to change farming and move away from industrial agriculture and grow our own food in our backyard and our community. And so you sort of have to figure how much is too far and how we're going to feed ourselves if you somehow undermine industrial agriculture. Yeah, a lot of text here, but this is from the article, and basically they cite The Guardian with this book, Regenesis, Feeding the World Without Devouring the Planet, and campaigners say we need to stop intensive farming, and his thing is say, no, it's not intensive, it's the farming itself, we need to stop farming. Well, what's that going to do to the world population? So more here about regenerative agriculture. The Bouzouki Group is an amazing group, free market people, Roblox, the company, and their son got severely mentally ill, and he healed himself by learning about metabolic health, by cutting out carbs. And now they're sponsoring randomized control trials around the world to show how schizoaffective disorder, bipolar, anxiety, depression are transformed. These are people who apparently have some kind of cerebral insulin resistance, and when they move over to ketones, their brain is healthier, they're more energized. And so there's research on that to try and find out the scope of that that's having inroads now into the psychiatry. This all came from fat psychiatrists. They got heavy, they couldn't lose weight, they went on a keto diet, they not only lost a bunch of weight, they felt much better. And they told their clients they couldn't prescribe it for mental health benefits, but they could for weight loss. And their clients did it to lose weight and got mentally healthy. Their conditions changed. So this is a huge, huge deal. And my take on the college snowflakes and the leftists on campus, well, what are they eating? Maybe they don't have enough brain energy. They're eating vegetables and they can't get enough bioavailable energy for their brain, so they can't handle contrary ideas. Now, it's usually bad form to claim your opponents are mentally ill. That's what the Soviets did to anybody who believed in free enterprise. So we don't want to take that too far, but we want people to have a chance to learn how to improve their health. So this is, agroecology is sort of about ancestral wisdom. I had a talk just about tortilla chips and things like that, and how they're fried and how they're cooked. But corn is like really unhealthy. The corn we have is unhealthy, the nutrients aren't available, so that's why it's all fortified. So all the packaged food with corn, it's all fortified because we've forgotten about nixtamalization. Nixtamalization is the ancestral way that you mix in ash or lye with corn to release, it detoxifies, neutralizes the anti-nutrients, raises calcium content, protein quality. And so this is what's done ancestrally in villages in Mexico. But now we're dumping all this U.S. corn at low price on Mexico that is not nutrient healthy the way that these ancient ones are. Now, the challenge is it means we have to spend our life in the village, cranking out this corn and processing it and doing that. So we need to find a modern way to get the metabolic benefits. Back to this, hidden half of nature. The key thing is what's underground. So when a cow munches some grass, that is a sign of damage to the grass. And so the cow gets some of the grass from the grass. The grass extrudes carbohydrates into the soil to feed the rhizome, that is the microbes in the soil. Those microbes go out and get the nutrients from the soil to feed the grass root to allow the grass to regrow. Now, and also provides protection and all this stuff. But every time we till a field, we're disrupting the microbiome. So in some sense, these people are sort of opposed to the agricultural revolution and the big tills that would, would rip up the soil. But now what's happening in the for-profit system is American farming is shifting to no-till and low-till agriculture. They're not ripping up the soil, they're not wrecking the rhizome, and they're getting healthier plants out of it. So you can see more about that online. One of the things I recommend highly is Soil Carbon Cowboys. This is a place north of Dallas. And basically these people are running like 5 or 10 times the density of cattle on their land. They're trying to emulate what the buffalo did. And so they have the cattle move every 3 hours to new grass. And they found they have a lot more cattle, they're healthier, and the whole area turned green over 5 years. That is, they had the effect of feeding the rhizome. The grass is back, it's green. And I'm not a fan of the whole idea that we've got to deal with global warming by carbon sequestration, but the low-till, no-till soil people and the carbon cowboys are sequestering massive amounts of carbon in the soil and getting healthier, more nutritious food out of it at the same time. And of course, some of them are claiming on the internet, I want subsidies for all this carbon I've sequestered in the soil. Well, no, you don't get subsidies, you just get healthy food, healthy cattle. But this is a revolution in agriculture, it's meaningful in the US, and the food is healthier when the soil's healthier, the animals are healthier, when the vegetables are healthier, and so on and so forth. Okay, my 5-minute card should be coming up. Or is it less than 5? It's 5. Oh boy. And we'll have time for questions later. So there's some cool, lots of stuff online. I go to these low-carb conferences, by the way, low-carb and keto conferences. Thousands of people attend these things, and they're not fans of government. They don't know about libertarian idea. They just know that government messed things up in their field. But one of the guys I meet is Peter Ballastat, and there's a book called Cows Save the Planet. There's all these benefits from ruminants, from cows and others, and he talks about this, the science of it. It's amazing. He says he's part of a secret society, the Ruminati, and they meet together and talk about ruminants and how they should be brought back. But it's fun stuff. At the same time, the World Health Organization, the government's trying to stop us with cattle, stop in foreign aid, reduce cattle, tell us to eat vegetables. Anyway, so here we have the captured government organizations in UK and US. This is the lady telling diabetics that they need to eat plenty of carbohydrates, right? Well, how does that work? How do you tell someone who's getting insulin and they say, well, you go ahead and eat what you want, you just need to cover it with your insulin. Well, that turns out to be a bad idea. Early November was Obesity Week in San Antonio. You can look at the schedule, zillions of companies, multi-billion-dollar industry, prescribing bariatric surgery, insulin, other sorts of things. But just telling people to look at their blood glucose levels and cut out those things that are causing them to surge, which is usually carbohydrates or sweets, that solves the problem for a lot of people. So now you've got dozens of companies that are prescribing metabolic health, therapeutic nutritional ketosis. You change your diet, if you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, your blood glucose normalizes in a few days. Your diabetes can go into remission in a few weeks. It's harder if you've been diabetic a longer time, but most doctors have never seen diabetes go backwards. They say it's a chronic condition. If my father knew that if he'd have to suffer and eat steak and eggs instead of oatmeal, I think he would have been up for that. I think he would have been up for that, and he would have suffered a lot less, and I wouldn't feel so guilty. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rehmke. Now we will have our second presentation by Walter Smith, who is everything. He is a physician. He has 2 passports, working on the 3rd, and he's a serial entrepreneur. He travels a lot. He's a crypto geek, and yesterday he told me something very special. I really believe he's a truly free man, because he told me, it doesn't matter what you say about me. That was so beautiful. This is what emotional freedom is like. We should all strive to be like Walter Smith.
Is it working now? Yeah, you got it. Okay. So if you whine enough, you get what you want. So I'm Walter Smith. I'm presenting a talk on how to live a long and healthy life. It's actually the same talk that I gave last year, so you're at risk of hearing an old man repeat himself. But I am an old man, and I'm going to start with a story about some old men. There were 3 old men living in this house, and one of the old men was upstairs, wanted to take a bath. Had everything ready, put his foot across the tub, stepped in, and paused, and yelled out, "Am I getting in the tub or out of the tub?" One of the men downstairs says, "I'll come up and give you a hand and help you figure it out." So he was also in his 80s, so he takes him a while to get up the stairs. He gets about halfway up, and he pauses and looks around and says, "Am I going up the stairs or down the stairs?" And the third man, he's down at the kitchen table. He hears all this, says, "God, I hope I never get that forgetful." And he goes knock, knock, knock on the wooden kitchen table and says, "I'll come up and help you both as soon as I figure out who's knocking at the front door." All right, so how are we going to do this? How do we ensure that we live a very long life? The answer is real simple. You just don't die. So why do people die? You all know reasons why people have died. Anybody want to throw out something? Cardiovascular disease, that's the big one, right? Heart attacks and strokes, metabolic diseases like the diabetes, neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease. Cancer is a big killer. So what do we do about all that? Well, there's a couple of things we need to discuss before we get into more details. One is the difference between a lifespan and a health span. Lifespan is how long a person lives from the time they're born. That's what their birth certificate says to the time they die, what's on their death certificate. Health span, on the other hand, is how long you're functioning in life, doing things that matter to you, what's valuable and meaningful in your life. As long as you're doing that, you have health. And you want to expand your health span, not necessarily just your lifespan. You don't want to spend the last 10 years of your life sitting in a wheelchair, drooling on yourself and not knowing where you are. Oops, okay. The other concept we need to keep in mind is the difference between a chronological age versus a biological age. Chronological age is just how old you are. You all know how old you are to the year and the month. Biological age is a little more nuanced. This is a determination of how well your organs are functioning and in relation to your chronological age. Some people in their 40s and 50s still look like they're 70. They've just had a hard life. They didn't take care of themselves. They've aged terribly. And there are some people who in their 70s look like they're still in their 50s, and they've aged gracefully and well. This is just a graph showing how that would show up. If you're an accelerated ager, that means you're aging too fast. The majority of the population are just going to be normal agers. Their chronological age and their biological age will be about the same. And then there's the super agers that really don't age very much. But how do you know what your biological age is? There's 3 basic methods to determine your biological age. One is physiologic testing, the next is biochemical testing, and genetic testing. Physiologic testing involves doing things like stress tests, lung function tests, the spirometries, muscle testing, your grip strength, cognitive tests. There's a whole series of these that can be done. Biochemical testing means they're drawing blood from your body and measuring for different proteins and other markers of aging. There's characteristic changes that happen over time, and those can be measured. And then genetic testing is where they look at the genome and look at different markers on the genome to see what's happened over time. There's certain genes that need to be shut down. That happens through methylation of the genome, and by determining how many spots on your genome have been methylated, they can determine your age. This is a protocol done by a longevity unit up at some university in Minnesota, I believe. You can see all the things that they do to do structural and functional assessments, the molecular assessments, and then they come up and they're able to plot you on that graph that I showed previously. It's a very intensive program, and it takes a while to get through that. Some of these things up here involve artificial intelligence. Now, some people think artificial intelligence is a threat to humanity. I've encountered it in my life several times, and it's always been beneficial. I have not seen the downside of it yet. So those people who are working in the computer field, if you can convince me that there's a downside to this, let me know. Up see if I, up here in this corner, you see a cardiogram, electrocardiogram. That's what they get when they measure your heart. AI has been trained to look at one of those and be able to determine your age just from the electrocardiogram within 7 years, assuming that you're a healthy person to start with. I don't even know a cardiologist can do that. I can't do it. Underneath that is an echocardiogram that they've trained to read. This picture up here is a picture of the back of the eye, the retina. And the AI can read that and determine exactly how old you are based on changes they see in the retina. Down here, this normally is in motion. What happens is someone's sitting at the chair, they stand up, walk towards the camera, walk back, sit down again. And AI sort of abstracts all that information and makes a determination of how old they are based on how well they're moving. You know, how well they can sit, what's their balance like, what is their structure. Everyone knows that a 10-year-old doesn't walk the same way as a 60-year-old. They have characteristic ways of walking that change. Now, the epigenetic changes. This is what I was referring to before. If you remember from high school, we all have DNA in our bodies. It's made up of this double-stranded helix, and that is made up of nucleotides that go in a certain sequence up and down the chain. What happens over here is when a gene is expressed, there's a promoter region that says go ahead and express that. Over here, there's some methylation that says these genes are not going to be expressed. Some of these are supposed to happen. You don't want, as an adult, to have your toes making heart muscle or lung muscle. Some things have to be turned on and turned off. Unfortunately, over time, some things get turned off that we wish would still stay on. Using the methylation pattern that they see on the genome, they can come up with different clocks that give you a biological age based on your genome. Horvath's clock here is the most common one used, but there are others. There's even one called Grim Age. Grim Age is supposed to be able to predict when you're going to die by the year and month. It's not a popular one. So what are we going to do about all these causes of death and aging in general? Okay, so if you want to avoid premature death, you need to have aggressive screening and prevention measures. You want to make sure you're not developing heart disease before you actually have the heart attack. The first sign of heart disease in most people is a sudden heart attack and death. You want to know about it ahead of time. You want to know what your cholesterol level is. You want to know what your cardiac output is. You want to be screened for cancer. We have much better screening tests than we used to have. We can now look for DNA markers and other protein markers of cancer in a blood test. Lifestyle changes are actually the ones that's going to have the biggest impact. If you know that you're going to be subject to one of these earlier diseases, you can take steps to try and prevent it. But in the meantime, you should be involved in lifestyle changes, because that will give you about 75% of the improvement that you'll get in your health span and lifespan. The other concept that I want you to know about is a longevity escape velocity. I don't know if it was Ray Kurzweil or Aubrey de Grey that came up with that concept, but the idea is to live long enough to take advantage of new life extension technology. So the concept behind this is biotechnology is improving rapidly. Actually, it's improving in a logarithmic way, so faster and faster all the time. The idea is that they'll come up with an intervention that will increase your lifespan by a year. During that year, they'll come up with another intervention that will increase your lifespan by 2 years. So now you've gained 3 years of extra healthy life. During that 3 years, they come up with another intervention that will improve your health span by 5 years. Now you've got 8 years. So you can see where I'm going with this. Ray Kurzweil, who is a futurist and predicts all these things, thinks that by the 2030s, we will have enough interventions that have been proven to work that we'll stop aging. And we'll be able to maybe even reverse some of the signs of it. Whether that'll happen or not, I don't know. But it's something to look forward to. All right, so 2 basic approaches to tackle the aging problem. First method is with the biochemical and cellular research in a laboratory. These are the things that you read about in the newspaper. Oh, they did this intervention and now we got mice that live twice as long as they used to. Well, I don't want long-lived life. There's problems with that approach. They come up with pills, and every pill has got side effects. There's nothing that's completely safe. Even drinking too much water can lead to side effects. The second approach is looking at population studies where they survey all the people who have already lived a long time and see if they have any traits in common that maybe we can emulate. Well, actually, there turned out to be quite a few, and that's what the emphasis of my talk will be. The lifestyle can give you the majority of the gain in health span. So what do people tell you to do when they say, well, you want to live a long time? Tell you exercise more, eat right, get some sleep. But they're not very specific about that, are they? If you went to your doctor and said, I don't feel well, and he says, well, you've got pneumonia, you need to take an antibiotic, goodbye, and he didn't tell you what kind of antibiotic, what dose to take, how long to take it, or anything, you'd be pretty disappointed. Well, the same thing happens with activity. How do you know how much exercise and stuff you're supposed to get? Well, superagers have active lifestyles. They didn't have gym memberships or expensive running shoes. They were all active out in their fields. They walked to markets and to visit friends. But we live in cities now, most of us, and we need to find some other form of exercise to help us stay fit. And so how much, how often, what kind? So the Germans did a nice study. They tried to figure it out. They wanted to see, is it cardiovascular? Do the marathon runners live the longest time, or is it the power lifters that build a lot of muscle mass? Which ones lived a long time? My advice for my patients is always train for what you want to do at age 80. Just imagine yourself at that age and make sure that you're able to do that. You have to surpass those levels when you're younger so that you can retain them when you're 80. Well, the Germans decided they were going to survey all the Olympic athletes since World War II or something like that and see which ones lived the longest. And the results were kind of disappointing. Neither the marathon runners nor the power lifters lived as long as the general population. There was one event, though, that stood out, and those people lived longer than the average population. Anybody want to guess what that one was? High jumpers. It just was counterintuitive. But think about what a high jumper does now. They sit around, they sort of keep themselves a little warmed up till their event takes place, and then they sprint as fast as they can down the track and leap as hard and with all their strength over a pole without knocking the pole over. So it's this big burst of energy real fast. So what do we get with that? High intensity interval training. There is more and more evidence showing that that is what gives you the best cardiovascular improvement and the best impact on your biological age of all the forms of exercise. So it involves some cardiovascular, it involves some resistance training, but it all has an impact. For people that are not real fit and can't indulge in that HIIT training, they also have a reduced exertion, high intensity training, ReHIIT, which is available. But I'd encourage you to look into that. If all you're doing is walking, walk at a moderate pace. Once your heart rate's at a steady amount, start walking very quickly till your heart rate jumps up real high, then slow it down till your heart rate goes back to just a moderate pace. Go a little bit longer, running, not run, but walk fast again till your heart rate's up. That's the take-home point. A sedentary lifestyle kills, okay? If you sit at a desk all day, don't do anything else, or it'll detract from your health span. How should you eat? Well, there are hundreds of diets out there. How do people pick what they want to eat? Should you be vegan or carnivore? Should you be on a Mediterranean or a paleo? Should you be on low calorie versus low carb? I don't really care what you pick. You have to consume a diet that brings you to a healthy metabolic state. Whatever works for you. That diet's going to be different from one individual to the next. As Mr. Rehmke pointed out, everybody's different. And not only that, but it's going to be different over time for any one individual. What you eat when you're in your 20s is not going to be the same diet that you eat when you're in your 60s. And how do you know which one of those is right for you? You can't just go by how you feel. You have to measure something to see if that's correct. What else have we learned? There's a few things that apply to all these diets. Hara hachi bu is a Japanese phrase. It translates approximately the stomach 80%, which just means avoid overeating. If anybody went to that Brazilian restaurant last night, you know you had a hard time with that. There's a couple of other things. All of these diets will have at least two things in common, no matter which one you pick. You want to minimize your ultra-processed foods. Those are foods that come in packages and little bags and things like that. And you want to minimize sugary beverages, which includes fruit drinks because it concentrates the sugar so much. Other than that, you have to do some measurement to know what your metabolic state is, to know which direction to go and which diet is appropriate for you. The best medicine is going to be at the end of your fork and not at the bottom of a pill bottle. We all want, including me, like to take a pill and say, I've solved the aging problem. I don't have to do anything else and worry about it. I've taken that pill. But it doesn't work that way. Life's not that simple. Sleep. 7 to 8 hours of sleep daily gives you the brain and body a chance to recuperate and restore optimal function. But this is a case where more is not better. Just because it's 7 or 8 hours is what they're determining doesn't mean you can sleep 10 hours and 12 hours and get more benefit. That doesn't work. The health benefit decreases if you go beyond that 8 hours. Personality traits. Now this was a surprising find for me, that a personality trait can actually promote longevity. But they did longevity studies based on people they followed from the time of the Depression, around the 1930s to around the year 2000, to see what kind of personality traits. It was actually started for a different reason, but they ended up using it to find out what personality traits would help people live the longest. Anybody want to guess what personality traits make you live a long time? That's what I thought. It was not optimism or sociability. Now, these two actually are important. They were contributing to longevity, but it wasn't the thing. It was conscientiousness was the trait that promoted the best longevity. Now, how did they define conscientiousness? That's the quality of wishing to do one's work well and thoroughly. Conscientious people are able to exercise self-discipline, self-control in order to pursue and achieve their goals, scrupulously organized and honest. Those people, when they choose to go on a diet, they stick to it. If they decide they're going to start an exercise regimen, they stick to it. They're conscientious about whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. And then optimism and sociability certainly help. Stress reduction played a big important role. People who knew how to relieve stress. We all have stress in our lives. You can't get through life without some stress. But having some way of letting off the steam, hanging out with friends, having a good hobby, music, meditation, exercise, my favorite, being out in nature. Social network, the sociability part, actually is an important part of this. Having family and friends with whom you can interact. Is there a community or tribe that you identify with, believing there's something bigger than you to be a part of? Libertarian movement, maybe? That also helped because you're interacting. Family gives you some responsibilities and they expect you to continue your responsibilities, and so you fulfill a role and you feel useful and needed. That's all leads to a longer life. This says, I used to call people, then I got into emailing, then texting, now I just ignore everyone. Don't be that person. Because the studies that they did really showed that loneliness kills people. The loneliest people died fastest. Purpose. What is your reason for getting up every morning? Another Japanese term, ikigai, finding joy in what you do in life. It's actually more than that. It's finding what does the world need, what are you good at, and what are you happy doing? And sort of combining all of those, finding that trait so that you have something that's meaningful to you. So finding your mission and purpose in life and goal setting. I believe everyone should have their own personal mission statement. Everyone knows that big companies have their mission statements, what they're doing. But you need to have a personal mission statement. What is your life about? What is the meaning of your life? What impact are you going to have on the world? Are you going to go into your time, go into the death, that darkness quietly without any objection? No, make a splash in the world. Do something. Goal setting. As long as you have something to look forward to, something you're trying to achieve, you will keep yourself going. The mind is a powerful thing. I have had patients that had terminal illnesses. We thought maybe they'd live 2-3 months. You can't guess exactly. but they wanted to stay alive because somebody was getting married, their granddaughter was getting married, or another grandchild was being born, or something like that. They would stay alive until that event would occur and then pass away shortly after that. They really have that kind of an impact on their health just by their mental attitude. So keeping goals in mind, knowing what your purpose and mission is. And this is the one that had actually the biggest impact in terms of the lifestyle things, is having an intimate relationship, a loving, romantic relationship with someone that's you're spending your life with. If you're lucky enough to find this, I'm jealous of you. Having a relationship with someone who accepts you for exactly who you are, someone who loves you in spite of who you are, someone with whom you can be totally honest, and losing that someone is your biggest fear in life. If you can find that person, that's great. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of love that when you first meet someone and you fall in love, when you got that oxytocin and dopamine flowing in your brain and you're walking around on cloud nine. That's a form of temporary insanity, and it wears off. It does wear off. After so many months or a couple of years, that feeling wears off, and then suddenly you wake up one day and you look and say, why am I with this person? And that's why a lot of people get divorced, because they wanted that feeling back again. But that feeling needs to be replaced by a different kind of love. And so hopefully you fell in love with somebody who shares your values, that is going to follow your trajectory in life, and the two of you can share everything together. That kind of love is also oxytocin-based. You can measure these things in the brain, by the way. And it will grow with time. All right, so what can you do to prolong your health span? See if that works. I think I still got at least 5 minutes. So if you're in your 20s, you don't have to do much of anything. You want to play hard, you want to work hard, you want to build up your muscle mass. Unless you know that you already have a health problem, you really don't need to do anything. Just live life. Enjoy relationships with people. Find what's meaningful to you. Find your direction. Determine what you think your mission in life is. If you're in your 30s, well, you want to get some baseline studies. You want to know basically what your biological age is. Do you have any illnesses? That's the time to buy your own blood pressure cuffs. You can monitor your own blood pressure at home. There we go. Let's see if it'll keep going now. So at that point, you need to test, don't guess. Even if you think you feel well, you really don't know if you have diabetes. It'll sneak up on you. You don't know if you have cancer in the early stages because it's asymptomatic. Only in the later stages, when it's hard to treat, does it become real symptomatic. But you need to take tests to find out how your health is, and you need to know what tests you want. You have to take full responsibility for your own health and health outcome. Don't count on the government, CDC, don't count on your doctor, don't count on your insurance companies to take care of you. Be your own wellness warrior and take care of yourself. I'm not saying don't ever see a doctor. Ask a doctor for advice. Ask them what they think about it. If what they say doesn't make sense, ask a different doctor. Am I out of time? All right. So I don't want to leave anything on a pessimistic note. I do think that the biohacking that's going to occur in the future will be tremendous. And I think the first person who will live to 150 is already alive today. I hope that person's in this room. I'd like to see that myself. So today is the first day of a very long life for all of you. Live long and prosper. And I'm done. Actually, did I have any time left? Do I have any time left?
Now we're going to, oh, hi, the mic is back on. Now I'm going to invite everyone on the stage, and we'll have 30 minutes for questions from me and the audience. So now one thing, I actually think the most important word in Liberty International's full name, which is International Society for Individual Liberty is the word individual. And you have mentioned that everyone is different, and what works for one person doesn't work for another. We may need different diets, and the problem was also this very generalized set of rules that we had through some public advice about what to eat and what not to eat. So how do we individualize this? How do we reach more people saying that, well, you're all different, maybe you one test says, the different test may say different things, it's different for other people. How do we spread this message? And how do we also test ourselves to know?
Okay, I think I'm still on. So I believe in testing, a lot of biochemical testing to know how you are. How do we spread that message to other people? Now that's tough. I went into the field of medicine, so I see people. Well, I used to see people every day, and I would tell them what they needed to do, what I thought was the best for them. I would also tell them where doctors gave bad advice, like going on those low-fat diets. And that's how I spread the word. But it was a one-to-one, which is why I'm glad now I've had the opportunity to speak at these LI conferences and at least say something to a wider group at once.
And I would say that the technology side of it, if it matters, measure it. So getting the blood tests, and I wear a Pixel watch that gives me information on how I slept and how long I slept. And I went to a sleep doctor complaining about problems, and she says, well, maybe take off the watch. so you don't want to be too wound up trying to measure everything that gets you anxious. But I was going to ask you about the biological age. I have one of those smart scales that shoots a little bit of electricity through me, and it gives me all this information about visceral health and other stuff, and it gives me a biological age. Well, it cost me $35 from Amazon. How accurate are scales in giving those measures that you mentioned with all the testing?
Well, I can tell you that there's probably at least a dozen or more companies that'll do a biological age assessment for you, and the cost will range several $100s usually. And I've used like 3 or 4 of them, and the answers that they give you are scattered. So the science is not very specific yet. I think a $35 scale will give you a $35 answer. I think it's better at giving you your percent of body fat, which will tell you a little bit about your visceral health. But I think that's a good thing to monitor on a daily basis, how things are. But I do think that you'll need some blood tests to determine your biological age, especially the genomic age.
And I also remember, I think, well, I don't remember that, but I've seen some ads from like 1950s Poland. Mother, give your child sugar. Sugar is good for you. So, and then the government once says vegetable oil is good, you should substitute butter. Then they say the opposite. There are so many cases in which one decade they say A, another decade they say not A. Do you think the public catches on to this? Do you think people are getting more conscious that maybe they are not given good advice, or is it still a problem?
It's a problem because they were given bad advice. I mean, when I started in medicine back in the 80s, I was told, well, you don't eat eggs, you don't drink coffee, and don't eat any bacon for breakfast in the morning. And those are all the wrong things. Those are the things that you should be eating. So people have become skeptical. What advice is being given? Well, how do I know it's going to be okay this time? Next week this will be something else. We were told drink red wine because it's got resveratrol in it. Well, resveratrol has not panned out at all. Take more antioxidants. Well, that hasn't panned out either. That hasn't extended anybody's lifespan. So I think people, if they haven't developed a lot of skepticism, should have a lot. There are ways to measure your omega-3 levels, all of the parameters that you need to know to keep a healthy life, and you have to find it out for yourself. Just ask for advice.
I would say it's a research project, and people have to find out what works for them. We don't have a Apple or other watch that'll measure our blood glucose level like a continuous glucose monitor, but just this July, I think, they made those over the counter. So you can get a CGM, and then you can look at your phone and you can see your blood glucose levels through the day. And the story is, one person has blueberries and their blood glucose surges, but not with blackberries. So everyone's different, and of course the amount matters. So, and your blood glucose naturally goes up when you're exercising or stressed or so forth. Talked about stress as one of the main things. I'm a real low stress guy, which is good, except I don't get anything done. So I mean, it's not ideal, I guess.
I wish I was a low stress person. And another question that, well, I guess Dominic is also in the room. He's a pharmacy student, and that's something also he said during Project Arizona fundraising dinner, and I agree with him. We hear so much about healing, like actual problems after they occur. We don't hear enough about prevention. Is there an incentive problem to this? What do you think should be changed? How do we do this?
You just heard a presentation on that. That was right down the line. You want to measure this stuff. You want to exercise, get the right kind of, one of the books I read called Get Wild, and they're saying what you need to do is really sort of dangerous, challenging exercise, like jogging on a mountain with a dog running between your feet. Well, okay, so there's trade-offs, I guess, in what exercise is best. I spend a lot of time going up and down 30 meters of steps because I live on the beach and everything's up, so I'm taking stuff up and down, and it's tricky getting up and down those steps. So I feel like I'm doing that every day, risking my life going up down these steps. So I guess that's good for me until I fall.
But well, I don't want to go like full conspiracy theorist on this. Like this is just for the sake of the questions and the panels. But do you think some of the information is gate kept for some people to make money?
Definitely. David Sinclair is a good researcher. He is associated with Harvard University, but he is the one that came up with this resveratrol concept. And he ended up patenting something to do with resveratrol, sold it to a big pharmaceutical company for like $50,000, and then once they had it, they couldn't reproduce any of his studies. Nothing panned out for him anymore. And so yes, people are coming up with all kinds of new molecules of the month to try and pan to people. And basically what they're trying to do is get money out of your pocket into theirs. So be skeptical of everything.
I remember an article years ago of a researcher in Florida doing testing on people eating the Big Mac breakfast and the inflammation or surge after that, but if they had orange juice, their blood glucose was more stabilized. Well, the next day, the orange juice industry noticed that study and supplied him with all the orange juice he could ever need. And I don't know if that's true. Most people I read are against fruit juices because of the glycemic load. You have a lot of fructose, sugar, and it goes in your system quickly, whereas you're having the fiber in an orange, it's a lower glycemic load. So again, it's what happens to you. But I used to, every time I had a McDonald's big breakfast, I'd have a glass of orange juice and think that was healthy, but I didn't have a way to measure my blood glucose levels. And if I'm driving on a trip doing that, I'd fall asleep in 30 minutes, that's not good. So.
Okay, and another thing I was thinking about when you talked about agriculture and farming and soil, how chickens are changing because of antibiotics that we feed them and how soil is getting depleted. Do you think that some going back to more organic farming, would that be economically efficient? Like, are there or would there be trade-offs?
So organic agriculture is a challenge because the government defines what organic is, and there's lots of lobbyists who want it defined in a way that fits the different products. So there's that. But you still have to have a way to get the nutrients to the plants, and you have to have a way to deal with pests. And so, the research by the people who do the lab testing for foods is often that organic food has more difficulty with residues and so forth. So you measure it. You try and figure out who's got the most nutrient-dense food. I have a friend who's involved in the federal level trying to block the takeover of organic defining, but he raises blueberries. And they cost more, but they are way more nutrient dense. He raised chickens, and there were restaurants in Seattle that would only use eggs from his chickens because they couldn't make the European recipes with regular American eggs. So there's, and eggs are more nutrient dense if the chicken is out in the sun. So how does that work? Well, there's lots of things like that we want to do the research to find out who's got the nutrient density, are people getting the adequate nutrients they need, and are their blood glucose and inflammation levels, inflammation low and blood glucose stable.
Okay, thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for that discussion. I think we have time for. We have a lot of time for audience questions, and I think we should do that. So Sarah will be taking your questions.
Thank you. That's Daniel. So I would like to invite you to just speculate on theories of aging, right? So, and I know in asking that there are many competing theories of aging. There's wear and tear. I'm particularly interested whether you believe or whether you think that there is something in our biology that is sort of programmed aging, or whether it's all due to wear and tear and we would live forever without, if there were not wear and tear. Or some other theory for why we age and why almost all, but not quite all, living organisms do age and die.
I actually had a slide that covered that, but I had to cut some things out for brevity. And there are probably about 8 or 9 reasons why people have theorized that we age. Wear and tear would be one, oxidative stress was the other. The programmed aging is interesting because we do see evidence of that in nature. Salmon, who's after they spawn, they fall apart real fast. That's programmed. My favorite theory, no one knows the answer, okay? So, but I'll tell you what my favorite theory is that nature doesn't care. Nature produces us for reproductive health. Once we've passed that reproductive health stage and raised their kids, nature doesn't care what happens to us. So there's no inborn repair mechanism to keep us going after we fulfilled the role that nature has assigned us.
My one thought is without aging, Franklin Roosevelt would still be president. So the argument there is that societies with people that live too long lacked flexibility. People that are older tend to be less flexible, and so the tribe can't adapt to problems. So maybe there were tribes where people lived super long time that weren't able to adjust to changing climate or circumstances. So that would be my sort of guess at that. My goal is to only get the diseases that billionaires get before me so that they can fund the research. And of course, they're putting a lot of money into life extension because they don't want to die. And so it's interesting to see what's going to happen with these huge amounts of money flow into various companies that are trying to track down these aging markers. So.
This is a question about the having fertile ground. A lot of the environmentalists want us to use, gasoline made from corn. And I talked to a farmer in Iowa, and he said he was so happy that program passed because he got better pricing for his corn. But my question is, should we be doing this at all? Because now you're taking nutrients out of the ground faster to make gasoline, which they're barely getting more energy out of the final product than the energy they put in. So if we want more fertile ground, should we be giving up on this ethanol from corn?
I actually haven't researched regenerative agriculture in the ethanol corn business. And so I don't know enough about how that you don't really need nutrient-dense corn for ethanol, I would think, unless some sort of additive that's beneficial. But raising crops for fuel, for cars and other biofuels and so forth, obviously it's a mess in terms of the finance side of it, But they thought it would work. They thought gasoline would go to, $20 a gallon, and that ethanol would be more efficient, and it just didn't work out. But yeah, it's another captured government subsidy. Every politician goes to Iowa and says they like ethanol, so it's stuck there. But the short answer is no, we shouldn't be doing that. Although now I'm thinking maybe eating the corn is worse. Maybe it's better in the car than in our bodies. I've become not a fan of industrial corn. So.
Another here.
Is it scientifically unreasonable to expect and want a bespoke pill per day for your nutritional needs? Not now, maybe in the future. Is it unreasonable?
Do you want me to try that? Well, it's not unreasonable to expect that. If you expect it out of a multivitamin today, that's not going to happen. Multivitamins don't do much for you. But it is possible that we will have the molecules and the knowledge in the future, especially if we can have AI start analyzing our biochemical pathways, because it's so complex. If you eat an apple, you get hundreds of chemicals that interact with our tens of thousands of pathways in the body, and to try and track what happens with each molecule as it passes through and the various impacts it has, it's impossible to follow just with our limited minds. AI might be able to solve that, and they may be able to come up with some nutrient pill in the future that actually does make a difference.
And I think that overhead that shows the declining nutrient density and particular nutrients needed, micronutrients in soil and food, is important, because that suggests we don't have enough magnesium and other things. One pill story was a study in a prison in England where they did a randomized control trial. They gave 100 of the prisoners a pill with essential fatty acids supplements, and the other 100 not, a placebo. And they found a significant decrease in violence among the prisoners who took the nutrient supplement, with the suggestion that violence and impulse maybe are related to not having the nutrients you need to manage your body.
Sort of a crazy question, but what do you think that if we could, as individuals, control the day we die and know when it's going to happen and set it and so on voluntarily? Obviously, accidents happen and so on, but say I decided I want to live 5 more years and no more. How do you think that would pan out in terms of people living healthier lives and perhaps more productive lives?
It reminds me of the Monty Python sketch where the person had signed up to be an organ donor, and they came early to get the organs. The challenge is you sign an agreement or you make that decision, but when you get there, you say, wait a minute, I don't want to die now, I need another year. So the challenge is many, many challenges. I'm using a Monty Python skit to analyze it, which isn't ideal, but.
From my experience, I've had patients with cancer who had a terminal diagnosis, and they say, well, I don't want any life-preserving steps taken. I just want to take its course. Got within months of them dying, and they changed their mind. Please save me. So I wouldn't be too quick to commit to a certain death date, but I do think it's your choice. You can choose it when you want, but don't necessarily make it a commitment on your part, because you might change your mind.
Are there any specific tools or apps that you might recommend to record all this, or specific tests and things to monitor? Just something more comprehensive we could look to about what we should be keeping track of, and what's the best way to keep track of that?
I think that's for me. It depends on your age and your specific health status. If you know that you already have some disease that you need to monitor, you're going to be focusing on that. If there's a family history of early heart disease or strokes or something like that, or different kinds of cancers, you need to be focusing on that. If you're just generally healthy, around age 30, you want to get your basic metabolic profile, you want to get your lipid profile, you want to be measuring your own blood pressure. You want to do as Mr. Rehmke does and have a scale at home that's giving you some feedback on your percent body fat, your biological age for whatever that scale has given you. So those are the things that you do when you're 30. At 40, you get much more aggressive about it. You want to spend the money to get that blood cancer screening, get tests for like 20 different cancers using about 150 different markers. It's well worth the investment because you can discover things far earlier that way than waiting till it appears otherwise. In your 50s and 60s, you continue that. You want to start getting your biological age measured every 6 months or so to see what interventions you're using that are making a difference and which ones are not.
So I've been using a Fitbit for years and years, and now it's on the Pixel Watch, and it keeps getting upgraded. So there's new measures of your cardio load, so it's looking at my last couple months of cardio load and then saying, look, you're not quite at your level, or, so I'm getting feedback of whether I've got enough exercise, or, it's tracking my heart, and if my heart isn't doing enough work, then it suggests I do a little more. And so the government could help us with this. You have mandatory watch that you can't take off, and instead of just a little vibration reminder, it gives you a little electric shock if you don't do what you're supposed to do. And then it can just ramp up the electricity until you move the way you need to. So anyway, I don't know how I got off into that. But by the way, on what counts, everything I read says visceral fat counts the most. So there's just 75 different kinds of scale on Amazon, and there's all these different and one is really cheap. I look at it, it's just a regular scale with a tape measure on it. So you measure your waist, and the ratio of your waist to your height, they say you don't want to have visceral fat, it's metabolically active, and does all these different things for the COVID pandemic. People with excess weight, obesity, visceral fat, did far worse than everyone else. And I'm not a doctor, you are. Wait a minute, you know about this stuff. But visceral fat seems to be a very important thing.
Yeah, fat is not an inactive bag of something in your body. It is very metabolically active. It releases inflammatory signals to the rest of the body. So you want to really keep the body fat down if you want to keep your inflammation in your body down.
With things like GMO seeds, landing on non-GMO farms and, things like you've talked about the soil, have we reached a point of no return with all this? I mean, how do we get back to eating? Can we ever get back to, say, the way we ate food in the 1900s? I mean, or are we completely screwed right now, at least in America?
So one thing I'd say is a whole bunch of people died in the early 1900s from the food they ate because it'd gone bad. They didn't have, we have huge benefits in safer foods, and refrigeration and things like that. So it wasn't an idyllic, perfect time in the past. People got poisoned. There's all sorts of, what do they say, the rice? You're not supposed to leave rice out even overnight because there's some sort of a toxin that's on the rice. So, there's all sorts of things that are dangerous. But back to your question of GMOs, genetically modified organisms, that's what plant breeding is, right? So the question is, can you change the genome in a way that's safe, that mimics plant breeding, and is safe? And those, I don't know the ins and outs of that, but people being afraid of frankenfoods, that anything has changed is going to be super dangerous. I'm more at looking at the nutrient density of foods and the micronutrients and what the impact of the food on you, on your particular body, because that's the key thing. And whether it's an ancient food or a modern food, you can buy foods from the 1900s, raised. Amish must be raising foods in their own way. You can find raw milk from here to there. So there's lots of ways to try and emulate safer food, but again, I'm not sure the best pathway on that.
Hi, Dominic. I'm the pharmacist Agnieszka mentioned about, and I wanted to go back to this prevention thing since we have taxes. And there's this idea of lowering taxes for the people that take some tests. Actually, what do you think about this idea? And my second question is, wait, I forgot. So maybe this one, and after you answer, I'm going to ask the second one.
Yeah, he wanted to know about, if I understood you, you want to know what our opinion is about lowering taxes on people who will undergo preventive testing.
Yes.
Well, I would say the government shouldn't have anything to do with it. It should be the insurance companies. The insurance companies that are trying to insure your health in the future should give you a discount if you've done all the preventive measures that you should be doing, that they know about. But don't count on them doing the right ones. Make sure you're taking charge of it yourself.
This, by the way, companies that self-insure, they have a huge incentive to reduce their costs. So they're bringing in various companies to look at the sickest people, to encourage them. And yeah, John Mackey at Whole Foods Market talks about the different, if people follow certain protocols or exercise or do this, they reduce their insurance fees. I talked to somebody whose husband worked for a company that he got a discount if he did a certain number of steps each day. So he came home and put his Fitbit on his dog and it ran around the backyard. So it's a challenge.
All right, thank you. I just think that well, education is not enough, and that points me to the second question. How would you make what would be your way to making the food in the US better? I'm from Europe, and I think the quality of food in Europe is way better. I think in Poland, I come from Poland, and I eat way healthier there. And yeah, I know we have lots of regulations, but maybe some of them are somehow beneficial to people. I just think you don't say to the people, "Oh, just don't drink the like colored beverages, right? Some Coca-Cola or stuff like that, because there's some artificials in that. Maybe some regulations in Europe are somehow beneficial. If not, what will be the right answer to the better quality of food in the US?
Well, a couple things I'd say. If you look at Panera bread, it is European bread brought to the US because the customers didn't know what good bread tasted like unless they went to Europe. So there's a lot of companies that are trying to bring European quality food to the US. So that's one way, because the people don't know what they're missing until you have a sandwich where the bread isn't like cardboard. And so there's the technology that side. I would also say there's a huge regulatory problem. Balin Linekin, I think, writes with a Reason magazine, and he has a couple books. But every time somebody tries to make better meat and this and that, they have local regulatory restrictions. There's all these barriers to people doing food. The European cheese is illegal because it isn't pasteurized, and so there's this underground market of people trading European foods. But I would look at the regulatory barriers part of it, and part of it is a huge entrepreneurial deal. What if better tasting food, it's a little more expensive, but it tastes better, you feel better, you live longer? That's a huge market opportunity. Chipotle now has choices. They've got the carnivore version, they've got the paleo version, they've got the vegan version. So you can buy the kind of food you want, apparently, from that place.
I wouldn't look to the government to solve that problem. I think as consumers, if we buy those healthier foods, that's what will make a big difference.
Okay, I think it will be time for lunch now, right? Are we scared for lunch? Are there going to be carbs? No. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Walter Smith and Gregory.